The Nature of Reality by Bandra. Welcome to Conversations That Awaken, a podcast where science, philosophy, psychology, mysticism, and direct experience come together to explore life's deepest questions. What is reality? Who are you beyond your thoughts, beliefs, and stories? Is consciousness merely a product of the brain, or is it the very foundation of existence itself? Join us as we journey beyond assumptions, challenge conventional thinking, and investigate the mysteries that have fascinated humanity for thousands of years. This is more than a conversation. It is an invitation to awaken to a deeper understanding of yourself, the universe, and the extraordinary reality we all share. Welcome to Conversations That Awaken.
Look down at your hand right now. I mean, literally, if you're listening to this, just hold it up in front of your face.
Right.
It feels solid, It looks completely continuous. It looks like it intrinsically belongs to you.
Exactly, it's yours.
Yeah. But if you actually ask a physicist what you are looking at, they will tell you that that hand is like 99.99999% empty space.
It's mostly just a void.
Oh, right. The distance between the nucleus of the atoms in your hand and the electrons orbiting them is, proportionally, it's just vast. And then, if you ask a neuroscientist what you're looking at, they'll tell you that you aren't actually seeing your hand at all.
Not even close.
No. You are looking at this delayed, internally generated software rendering. And it's constructed in the pitch black of your skull, based on these electrical signals that took time to travel up your arm and, through your optic nerve.
Right, the processing time.
Yeah. So you are literally living milliseconds in the past, basically hallucinating a solid object that is mostly a void.
It's wild to think about.
It really is. So if you're joining us, it means you're a learner. You want to look past the surface level of things. And today, we are tackling what is honestly probably the most fundamental, brain-breaking question a human being can possibly ask, which is what actually is reality?
It's the ultimate question, right? And
Yeah.
The fact that we just gloss right over it in our day-to-day existence is, well, it's a survival mechanism, honestly.
Oh, for sure.
Because, we have to pay the mortgage, we have to drive in traffic. So it's incredibly practical to just assume reality is exactly what it looks like. The pavement beneath your feet, the car in front of you, the physical body you're walking around in.
You'd crash your car if you were constantly thinking about atoms.
Exactly. But the really fascinating thing we're going to explore today is that the very millisecond you actually begin to poke at that baseline assumption, your sense of certainty just completely dissolves.
It totally falls apart.
It does. And this isn't just, philosophical navel-gazing. Once you actually understand the mechanics of how reality is constructed, it fundamentally shifts how you perceive every single moment of your day, your relationships, your stressors, and even your own identity.
Absolutely. And to guide us through this absolute paradigm shift, our primary source material today is drawn from an incredible upcoming book titled The Nature of Reality by Bandra.
Such a fantastic resource.
It really is. We're going to use the core concepts presented in this work as our jumping off point, because before we can even talk about the universe out there, space and time, we have to talk about the biological filter right here. Bandra points out an incredibly deep insight in the book that essentially pulls the rug out from under human perception. He explains that we never actually directly experience reality.
Never.
We only ever experience our internal interpretation of it.
Which is such a profound realization when you break down the actual physical mechanics of what is happening in your body right now.
Right, like the actual biology.
Exactly. Consider something incredibly mundane, right? Like looking at a tree in your front yard. It feels entirely obvious that your awareness is sort of reaching out, crossing the space of your yard, and touching that tree.
Yeah, you look at the tree, you see the tree. Simple.
Right, but mathematically and biologically, that is entirely backward. What is actually happening? Well, light from the sun travels 93 million miles through the vacuum of space, enters Earth's atmosphere, and it hits the physical structure of that tree.
Which is just crazy to begin with.
I know. And then certain wavelengths of that light are absorbed by the chlorophyll in the leaves, and the green wavelengths are reflected back out. And then a tiny microscopic fraction of those reflected photons happen to enter the pupil of your eye.
Right, and the journey is just starting there.
Exactly. Those photons hit the retina at the back of your eye. And your retina is essentially this dense layer of photoreceptor cells, rods and cones. Now, here is where the massive translation happens. The retina's entire job is to die on the hill of translation.
I love that phrasing.
Right. It takes physical light particles and triggers a chemical reaction that converts them into electrical action potentials. And at this exact moment, light stops existing in the process.
Wow, so inside the brain there is literally no light.
Zero. It is pitch black in there. It is now just an electrical current. That current travels down the optic nerve, gets routed through the thalamus, which is kind of like the brain switchboard, and finally hits the visual cortex at the very back of your brain.
Right.
The visual cortex then takes millions of these firing electrical impulses and essentially constructs a high-resolution 3D mental image. So, the green tree that ultimately appears in your consciousness is not the tree itself. It is a biological rendering. It's a representation.
I've always thought of it like wearing an incredibly highly advanced VR headset from the exact moment you were born.
Oh, that's a perfect analogy.
Right, because when you put on a VR headset, you are completely immersed in a digital world. You see a mountain, you see a sky, you can reach out and grab a virtual cup, but you never actually see the ones and zeros of the computer code that's running the simulation.
You don't see the hardware.
No, you never see the graphics card, the silicon chips, the electricity flowing through the motherboard. You only ever experience the software rendering presented on those tiny screens inside the headset.
Exactly.
And what we are talking about here is that everyday waking life operates on that exact same principle. The blue sky above you, the sound of your favorite music, which is literally just compressed airwaves turned into electrical signals in your cochlea, and even the sensation of your own physical body. All of these are experiences appearing within your consciousness.
Yeah, the VR analogy is actually perfect because it highlights the limitation of our interface, you know? A VR headset only renders what it is programmed to render.
Right.
Similarly, human biology only renders a tiny sliver of objective reality. Take the electromagnetic spectrum, for instance.
Oh yeah, this blew my mind.
Right, because we only see what we call visible light, which is a minuscule fraction of the actual spectrum.
Yeah.
We don't see infrared, we don't see ultraviolet, we don't see radio waves or X-rays, but they are all physically there in the room with you right now, like Wi-Fi.
Exactly. Wi-Fi signals are passing straight through your body right now. You don't see them because your biological VR headset just doesn't have the sensors to render them into your conscious experience.
But wait, let me push back on the implication of this for a second.
Sure, go ahead.
If I'm living in a delayed VR rendering of the world, why does it feel completely instantaneous? I mean, if there's all this processing photons hitting retinas, chemical translations, neural routing, shouldn't there be a noticeable lag?
You'd think so, yeah.
Right. Like, why don't I experience reality like a badly synced movie where the audio and the video just don't match up?
That is a brilliant question, and the answer is honestly one of the most mind-blowing discoveries in neuroscience. There is a lag.
Wait, there is?
Yes. It takes roughly 80 to 100 milliseconds for your brain to process incoming sensory data into a conscious experience.
Okay.
You are literally living a tenth of a second in the past.
That is deeply unsettling.
It is, but you don't feel it because your brain is a prediction machine. It essentially edits the timestamps on your sensory data. What do you mean, edits the timestamps?
Okay, so when you touch your nose with your finger, the tactile signal from your nose reaches your brain much faster than the signal traveling all the way up your arm from your finger, just because of the physical distance.
Oh, right. The arm signal has farther to travel.
Exactly. But your brain holds onto the nose signal, waits for the finger signal to arrive, syncs them up, and then presents them to your consciousness as happening simultaneously.
You've got to be kidding me.
No. Your brain is essentially smoothing out the lag to create a seamless user experience.
So my own brain is actively lying to me to make me feel comfortable in the simulation.
Well, it's lying to you to keep you alive. I mean, if you were constantly distracted by the lag of your own processing, you wouldn't be able to catch a thrown ball or, dodge a predator.
Right. That makes evolutionary sense.
But the ultimate takeaway for the listener here is this: everything you know about the world, every firm belief you hold, every absolute judgment you make about a situation, it all arrives through this highly edited, lagging, internal process of interpretation. You are basically living inside the cathedral of your own consciousness.
And realizing that is really step one in waking up. Because once you know that the VR headset is strapped to your face, you can start questioning the nature of the software.
Exactly.
And it's not just modern neuroscience telling us this. I mean, we know it's the classic Plato's cave scenario. We don't need to labor over the setup. We all know the shorthand, right?
Right, the prisoners chained in a cave.
Yeah, watching shadows cast on a wall by a fire behind them. They think the shadows are reality because it's literally all they've ever seen. But what modern neuroscience does is take Plato's fire and mathematically prove that the fire itself might just be another shadow.
It's turtles all the way down.
It really is. Are the bank accounts we stress over, the societal structures we build, just shadows cast on the wall of our consciousness by something much deeper that we just don't have the biological hardware to see?
Which brings us to an even more unsettling dilemma.
Oh boy, here we go.
If our waking life is a constructed rendering, how is it fundamentally any different from a dream?
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Think about the mechanics of dreaming. Every night, your brain cuts off sensory input from the outside world. It essentially goes offline. And yet, it manages to generate an entire immersive 3D world.
Complete with other people and physics.
Exactly. You experience gravity, you hear voices, you feel genuine terror if you're being chased, or genuine joy. You interact with environments that feel entirely convincing. And while you are in the dream, unless you are lucid dreaming, obviously you do not question the reality of what you're experiencing.
Never. It feels 100% real.
Right. You accept the dream as absolute baseline reality.
It's wild. Your brain is simultaneously playing the role of the architect designing the world, the actors populating the world, and the observer experiencing the world, all while completely tricking the observer into thinking the world is external.
That's the perfect way to phrase it.
But, okay, here's where my brain starts to resist this comparison.
I figured you'd push back on this.
I have to. It is really easy to sit here and play dorm room philosopher and say, oh, life is just like a dream. But waking life feels categorically different. When I wake up, the desk is still sitting exactly where I left it.
Right.
The mortgage still has to be paid on the first of the month. There is a rigid permanence, a continuity, and a shared consensus to waking life. If I stub my toe on a table, it hurts, and the table's still there tomorrow. Dreams are fluid and chaotic. So how does the book actually challenge that deep sense of security we get from the continuity of waking reality?
So your pushback is exactly where most people draw the line, but we have to look at why it feels different. In a dream, the prefrontal cortex, which is the part of your brain responsible for logic, critical thinking, and recognizing bizarre inconsistencies, is essentially powered down.
So your logic center is literally asleep.
Exactly. That's why you can talk to a giant talking dog in a dream and just be like, yeah, this makes sense, and accept it. In waking life, your prefrontal cortex is highly active, validating the continuity. But the point of comparing waking life to a dream isn't to say that the desk isn't physically there or that your mortgage is fake.
Right.
The point is to highlight the vulnerability of the observer. The dream state proves, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that the feeling of, quote, this is absolutely real, is just a chemical neurosignature that your brain can artificially generate without any external input whatsoever.
Okay, wow. So the feeling of reality isn't a property of the outside world, it's a property of the brain.
Exactly. The feeling of realness is just another rendering in the VR headset. So if your mind can completely fabricate the signature of reality at night, it demands that we approach our daytime rendering with extreme humility.
It really breaks our blind faith in appearances.
It has to, because humanity has a spectacularly terrible track record of putting blind faith in appearances.
We really do. Historically, we look at appearances, lock in our certainty, and then look completely foolish a century later.
Every time.
I mean, we believed the Earth was completely flat because to our biological sensors, the horizon looks flat.
Right, it looks flat to the eye.
We believed the sun moved around the Earth because our daily VR rendering shows a glowing orb rising in the east and setting in the west. Every single time we assumed our local biological interface was giving us the ultimate objective truth of the universe, we were drastically wrong.
And the greatest paradigm shifts haven't even come from biology, but from physics.
So true.
To understand the magnitude of how wrong our intuition can be, we really have to look at how the clockwork universe collapsed.
Right, the Newtonian model.
Yes. For a few hundred years, thanks to Isaac Newton, science thought it had reality mostly figured out. And the Newtonian worldview was incredibly intuitive because it matched our VR rendering. Reality was viewed as a giant, predictable machine. It was a universe consisting of solid objects moving through an absolute empty void of space, governed by a universal ticking clock called time.
All right, the giant billiard table analogy. If you hit a ball with a certain force at a certain angle, it will bounce off the cushion in a perfectly predictable way.
Cause and effect.
Exactly.
Oh.
If you had a supercomputer powerful enough to know the position and momentum of every single atom in the universe, you could theoretically predict the entire future of reality.
That was a dream of determinism.
It was comforting.
It was very comforting. It gave us the Industrial Revolution. It let us predict the tides and planetary orbits. But then Albert Einstein arrives and completely shatters the billiard table.
He really did ruin the party for determinism.
He did. Einstein looked at this comfortable machine and realized it was a total illusion. He proved that space and time are not separate things. Space isn't an empty stage, and time isn't a universal clock ticking away in the background for everyone.
Right.
They are woven together into a dynamic, flexible fabric called space-time.
Okay, let's unpack the mechanics of space-time, because it's easy to say fabric, but what does that actually mean for you, the listener, in real terms?
So think of the classic trampoline analogy.
Okay.
If you have a perfectly flat trampoline, that is empty space-time. Now drop a heavy bowling ball representing the sun into the center.
The fabric sags down.
Exactly. The fabric of the trampoline warps and curves downward under the mass. Now, take a smaller marble representing the earth and roll it across the edge of the trampoline. It doesn't move in a straight line anymore, right?
No, it gets caught in the dip.
Right. It gets caught in the curve created by the bowling ball and sort of orbits around it. Einstein showed that gravity isn't this invisible magnetic tether pulling things together out of nowhere. Gravity is the physical curvature of reality itself.
Mass tells space-time how to curve, and space-time tells mass how to move.
Precisely. And because space and time are the same fabric, if you warp space, you must also be warping time.
Which is just, I mean, that's where my brain starts to hurt.
This is time dilation. Time literally moves slower the closer you are to a massive object. A clock on the surface of the Earth ticks slightly slower than a clock floating in deep space.
Wait, really? Like measurably?
Oh, absolutely. We literally have to program relativity into the software of GPS satellites.
You're kidding.
No. If we didn't account for the fact that time is moving faster for the satellites in orbit than it is for our phones on the ground, the GPS grid would fail by miles within a single day. Time is entirely relative to speed and gravity.
But wait, this brings me back to my earlier friction with all this. My biological experience of time is intensely linear. I remember yesterday. I am experiencing today. I have absolutely no memory of tomorrow.
Right.
If Einstein's equation suggests that time is a physical dimension, part of this block universe, where past, present, and future all simultaneously exist on this fabric, why does human consciousness only slice through it in one direction?
So that is one of the deepest unresolved debates in physics. The arrow of time is largely attributed to entropy, right?
Second law of thermodynamics.
Exactly, which states that closed systems always move from order to disorder. You can drop a glass and watch it shatter, but you never ever see the shards spontaneously reassemble into a pristine glass.
Right.
The math works perfectly well in reverse, by the way, but the probability dictates the forward motion. But crucially, Einstein himself believed the distinction between past, present, and future is only a stubbornly persistent illusion.
A stubborn illusion.
Yeah. Your conscious experience of the present moment is basically just the leading edge of your particular trajectory through the space-time block.
Man. So Newton was wrong. The universe isn't a rigid clockwork. It's this flexible, warping, relative fabric.
Right.
But just as we were getting used to Einstein's curved space-time, scientists started looking in the other direction. They didn't look up the massive stars. They looked down into the subatomic world. And when they got there, they found out that reality was about to get infinitely stranger.
Oh, it gets so much weirder.
Because the moment you introduce quantum mechanics, the very concept of a solid, objective universe completely evaporates.
It really does. Because when physicists began isolating the tiniest building blocks of nature, photons, electrons, quarks, they fully expected to find microscopic billiard balls.
Right, just smaller versions of everyday objects.
Exactly. But what they found was that matter completely stopped behaving like solid objects. Let's break down the mechanics of the most famous demonstration of this, which is the double-slit experiment. If you want to understand the limits of reality, you have to understand this experiment.
Yes, let's walk through this step by step for the listener because it's so important. Okay, so imagine you have a wall with two vertical slits cut into it.
Right.
And behind that wall, you have a blank detector screen, like photographic paper. Now, if I take a tennis ball machine and fire tennis balls at the two slits, what happens?
Well, the balls either bounce off the wall or they go through one of the two slits and hit the screen in the back.
Right. And eventually you get two vertical bands of marks on the screen. This is how solid matter behaves.
Exactly. Now, what happens if you put the entire setup underwater and you push a wave toward the two slits?
Okay, so the wave hits the wall. It passes through both slits simultaneously and splits into two new waves on the other side.
Right, and those two waves then ripple out and crash into each other. Where the crest of one wave meets the crest of another, they amplify. Where a crest meets a trough, they cancel each other out.
Creating an interference pattern.
Yes. When those waves hit the back screen, instead of two bands, you get a whole series of many bands, like a barcode pattern, showing where the waves interfered with each other. So, just to summarize, particles make two bands, waves make an interference pattern.
Okay, here is where reality breaks.
Ah.
The scientists took an electron gun, firing incredibly tiny solid particles of matter, and shot electrons through the two slits.
And they expected to see two bands on the screen, like the tennis balls.
Of course. But instead, the electrons created an interference pattern, just like the water wave.
Which shouldn't happen with particles.
Right. So they thought, the electrons must be bouncing off each other in midair. So to fix it, they slowed the gun down. They fired one single electron at a time. Pip. Wait an hour. Pip.
So there's no way they could interact.
Exactly. The single electron goes through, hits the screen as a single dot. Nothing for it to bounce off of. But after firing thousands of single electrons over a month, the individual dots slowly built up an interference pattern.
You have to let the weight of that sink in.
It's unbelievable.
A single particle of matter, fired alone, is somehow passing through both slits at the same time, interfering with itself and hitting the screen. The math tells us that the unobserved electron isn't a physical object at all. It is a wave of pure probability.
It exists everywhere and nowhere.
Right. It exists in a superposition of all possible paths. It is only when it hits the screen that the wave function collapses and it finally chooses a definite physical location.
But wait, it gets crazier. The scientists couldn't handle this. They said, that's impossible. A single electron can't go through two slits at once. We need to look at it.
Right. They wanted to catch it in the act.
Yeah. So they put a measuring device, a tiny camera essentially, right at the slits to observe which slit the single electron actually goes through. They fire the electron, the detector sees it go through the left slit, it hits the screen, they fire another, it goes through the right slit, hits the screen. After thousands of shots, they look at the screen and the interference pattern is completely gone.
It just disappears.
It's two bands, like the tennis ball.
This is the observer effect, and it's terrifying. The very act of observing the electron, of extracting information from the system, forced the wave of probability to collapse into a definite particle before it went through the slit.
It knew it was being watched.
Essentially, yes. The matter literally changed its behavior because it was being measured. Now, what constitutes a measurement, or an observer, is fiercely debated in physics. Whether it requires a conscious mind or just microscopic physical interaction causing what we call decoherence. But the fundamental truth remains. At the bedrock of reality, there are no solid objects.
Just probabilities.
There is only a field of probabilities, and the observer is fundamentally inseparable from the observed reality. You cannot passively watch the quantum world. The act of looking forces reality into existence.
It's completely mind-bending. Richard Feynman, one of the most brilliant physicists of the 20th century, and the guy who developed much of the math for this, famously said, "I think I can safely say that nobody understands quantum mechanics."
And that is an astonishing admission from a guy like that. But there's a vital thematic transition here for the listener. If the most brilliant scientific minds in human history, the people who build supercolliders and deal in advanced mathematics, are ultimately humbled by the fundamental nature of reality, then for us to walk around in our daily lives with absolute rigid certainty about our immediate problems is just foolish.
It's hubris.
It is. The appropriate response to the deep nature of reality isn't certainty, it's wonder. And wonder begins the exact moment we recognize how little we actually know.
Which perfectly sets up why the power of not knowing is so critical. Over 2,000 years ago, the philosopher Socrates famously declared, "I know that I know nothing."
Right.
And I used to read that and think it was just, false modesty. But in the context of what we're talking about, it's actually the most scientifically accurate statement a human can make.
It is entirely accurate. Socrates wasn't celebrating ignorance. He was acknowledging the absolute limits of the human operating system. He understood a fundamental psychological truth, which is that genuine inquiry, real learning, only begins when you admit the possibility that your baseline assumptions might be wrong.
If your cup is already entirely full of certainty, you cannot pour any new truth into it.
Exactly. And the human condition is that we are fundamentally assumption-making machines. Neuroscience actually backs this up with the predictive processing model of the brain we talked about earlier.
Oh, right.
The brain doesn't just passively receive information, it actively hallucinates a reality based on past experiences and assumptions, and then only uses sensory input to correct the hallucination if it makes a prediction error.
Anil Seth, a cognitive neuroscientist, calls waking reality a controlled hallucination.
That's the perfect term for it. We just stack these hallucinated assumptions all day long. We assume the world exists independently of us. We assume time moves from past to future. We assume we know exactly who our coworkers are and what their actual intentions are.
I want you, the listener, to really ground this in your daily experience. Consider how many of your daily stresses and anxieties are built on completely unexamined assumptions. You get a 2-word email from your boss that says, "See me."
Oh, the worst email to get.
Right. You immediately assume you know what that means.
Yeah.
Your brain's predictive model accesses your insecurities, and suddenly you're hallucinating a reality where you are fired, you lose your house, and your life is over.
The full spiral.
Yeah. Your heart rate spikes, your cortisol floods your system. Your physical body is reacting to a timeline that doesn't actually exist anywhere except in the VR rendering of your mind.
And when you start pulling the thread on these assumptions, just like science did with the flat Earth or the clockwork universe, the entire structural integrity of your stress just begins to unravel.
Because you realize the anxiety is just a shadow on the cave wall.
Precisely.
But to truly dismantle this, we have to tackle the biggest assumption of all. If we have established that the external world is a neurological rendering, and if quantum mechanics tells us the observer creates the reality, the terrifying next question is, who is the observer?
Right.
Who is the one looking at the rendering? Who is the I that is experiencing this reality?
This is where it gets deeply personal, because if you walk down the street and ask 100 people, who are you? Almost all of them will point to their chest and say, I am this body. But biology completely dismantles the illusion of the body as a permanent, static thing. The physicist Richard Feynman reminded us of a very poetic reality. The heavier atoms that make up your physical body right now, the iron in your blood, the calcium in your bones, they were forged in the nuclear furnaces of ancient stars that exploded billions of years ago.
We are quite literally made of recycled stardust.
We are. But even beyond that deep history, your body is in a state of violent, constant change right now.
Yes, it's the biological ship of Theseus paradox.
Oh, explain that one.
So for anyone who doesn't know the thought experiment, if you have a wooden ship and over 10 years you replace every single plank of wood as it rots until no original wood remains, is it still the same ship?
Right.
Your body does exactly this. Cellular turnover is happening every second. Your skin cells replace themselves every few weeks. Your red blood cells last about 4 months. Even your skeleton completely replaces itself roughly every 10 years. The physical atoms sitting in your chair right now are largely not the same atoms that were sitting in your chair a decade ago.
Exactly. The body is not a static noun. It's a verb. It's a process. It's a constant flow of energy and matter. Think of a standing wave in a river, you know? Yeah. The wave looks like a solid, permanent object from the shoreline, but it's actually just water constantly rushing through a specific pattern. Your body is a standing wave. So if your physical form is constantly being swapped out, it cannot be the fundamental permanent self.
Which is a tough pill to swallow for a lot of people.
It is. And when you point this out to people, they usually retreat to the second line of defense, which is, okay, fine, I'm not my body. I am my mind. I am my memories, my personality, my beliefs.
But the mind is just as fluid as the body.
Totally.
We used to think memories were like files stored on a hard drive. You open the file, read it, and put it back perfectly intact. But modern neuroscience shows us the process of memory reconsolidation.
Mm-hmm.
Every time you recall a memory, the neural synapses literally unlock, become malleable, and are rewritten with the new context of your present emotional state.
You're changing the past just by looking at it.
Exactly. You are actively altering the memory just by remembering it. We generate false memories all the time. Your beliefs, radically different than they were a decade ago. Your personality, it shifts depending on whether you're talking to your mother, your boss, or your spouse.
We contain multitudes.
We do. The thoughts you are having right now are popping into existence from nowhere and vanishing into nowhere. The 10-year-old version of you is dead and gone.
So we really have to ask, if the body is a river and the mind is just passing weather, what is actually left? What remains constant?
That is the million-dollar question.
Stripped of the body, the memories and the social titles, the I am a manager, I am a parent, I am a progressive, I am a conservative. Beneath all the labels, there is only the bare, irreducible sensation of existence, the pure feeling of I am.
Just awareness.
Yes. It is the blank canvas of awareness upon which the painting of your life is constantly being brushed and erased.
But I need to challenge this, because this is where the philosophy can start to feel really alienating for people.
I understand that, yeah.
If my body, my personality, my loves, my quirks, and my history are all just temporary weather patterns, isn't reducing myself to a blank slate of awareness, stripping away everything that actually makes me human? Doesn't it make life kind of cold, detached, and nihilistic? If I'm just an empty observer, why care about anything at all?
That is a very poignant and natural reaction, but I think it's a misunderstanding of what that awareness actually is. Recognizing yourself as awareness doesn't detach you from humanity, it prevents you from being imprisoned by it.
How so?
Well, if you believe you are your anxiety or you are your job title, then when the anxiety spikes or the job is lost, you feel like you are being completely annihilated. But if you recognize you are the awareness experiencing the anxiety, you create space.
Buffer zone.
Exactly. You can fully engage in the play of life. You can love deeply. You can build things without being utterly terrified of the scenery changing. And scientifically speaking, peeling back the ego to find pure awareness opens the door to the ultimate mystery in human understanding. We have to confront what's called the hard problem of consciousness.
The hard problem. Coined by the philosopher David Chalmers, right?
Yes.
The text explains that the easy problems of consciousness are the mechanical ones. Neuroscience is phenomenal at mapping the brain. We can put you in an fMRI machine and see the amygdala light up when you're scared, or the visual cortex fire when you see an apple. We can map the correlates of consciousness perfectly. But the hard problem asks the impossible question, why does it feel like anything to exist?
Yes. Why does the mechanical processing of data produce a subjective inner world? Take the famous philosophical thought experiment of Mary the color scientist.
Oh, this is a great one.
Imagine Mary is a brilliant neuroscientist who has spent her entire life locked in a black and white room. She has learned every single physical fact there is to know about color vision. She knows exactly what wavelengths of light correspond to the color red. She knows exactly how the retina processes it and how the brain reacts. She knows all the physics and all the biology.
She has all the data.
All of it. Then one day, the door opens, and she steps outside and sees a red apple for the very first time. The question is, did Mary learn something new?
Absolutely she did. Because knowing the data of red is completely different from the subjective qualia, the raw feeling of experiencing red.
Precisely. And no scientific theory of conventional physical materialism can explain how unconscious, dead matter atoms and molecules suddenly switches on and generates subjective feeling just because it's arranged in a complex neural network.
It's like saying if you build a complicated enough clock, eventually the gears will start feeling anxious.
Exactly. It doesn't make any logical sense.
And this seemingly unsolvable mystery has sparked a massive scientific paradigm shift, leading incredible thinkers to question if our entire baseline assumption is just backward. What if consciousness isn't a byproduct of matter? What if consciousness is fundamental to the universe and matter is the byproduct?
It flips the whole model upside down.
It does. And what blew my mind in the research is that this isn't some new age crystal healing philosophy. These views were held by the literal founders of quantum physics, the guys who won Nobel Prizes and built the foundation of modern technology.
They absolutely were. Let's look at the roster here. Max Planck, the father of quantum theory, the man who literally discovered the energy quanta, explicitly stated, "I regard consciousness as fundamental. I regard matter as derivative from consciousness. We cannot get behind consciousness." He believed that the physical universe is essentially an extrusion of mind.
It's staggering.
Then you have Werner Heisenberg, one of the main architects of quantum mechanics. He looked at the probabilistic nature of the quantum world and proposed that the deepest level of reality isn't composed of things, but of possibilities.
Let's break down Heisenberg's idea of potentiality, because he actually drew on Aristotle for this, which is fascinating.
Yeah, go ahead.
Think of a coin spinning on a table. While it's spinning, is it heads or tails? It's neither, and it's both. It exists in a state of pure potentiality. It only becomes heads or tails when you slam your hand down and force it to stop.
Right.
Heisenberg suggested that subatomic particles are like the spinning coin. They're just mathematical tendencies, potentials, until the active observation, the interaction with consciousness or a measuring device, slams the hand down and forces reality to take a definite shape.
And then the theories go even further. Erwin Schrödinger, famous for his cat thought experiment, suggested something radically unifying. He argued that consciousness is fundamentally a singular entity. The division of consciousness into billions of separate human minds is an illusion created by the biological interfaces.
Wait, one consciousness?
Yes, he used the analogy of a crystal casting multiple fractured rainbows from a single light source. The rainbows look separate on the wall, but the light is one.
Okay, you're losing me a bit with the next physicist, David Bohm. He proposed the idea of the implicate order. Can you break down what that actually means? Are we saying the universe is essentially a hologram? What does an undivided wholeness actually look like in physics?
It's a challenging concept for sure, but the hologram analogy is actually the best way to understand it. In normal photography, if you take a picture of an apple, cut the photo in half, and throw away the right side, you lose the right side of the apple. The information is localized.
Right.
But a hologram is created by interference patterns of lasers. The bizarre property of holographic film is that if you cut a holographic image of an apple in half and shine a laser through just the left half, you don't get half an apple. You get the entire apple, just at a slightly lower resolution.
Are you serious?
Yes. Every single piece of the holographic film contains the information of the entire whole.
Oh, wow. So the part contains the whole.
Yes. Bohm argued that the reality we see, the separate objects, the distinct people, the isolated stars, is the explicate order. It's the unfolded surface-level reality. But beneath that, supporting it, is the implicate order, an underlying, unbroken wholeness where everything is enfolded into everything else.
That's beautiful.
It is. In Bohm's universe, distance and separation are just illusions of the explicate order. Deep down at the implicate level, the electrons in your brain and the electrons in a galaxy billions of light years away are intimately entangled parts of a single, undivided system.
I just have to marvel at this. You have pioneers of hard science dealing with intense mathematics and supercolliders, and when they reach the absolute bedrock of physical reality, they end up sounding exactly like ancient mystics.
They really do.
It's as if the deeper science goes into the micro workings of the universe, the more unified and spiritual it appears.
It is a stunning convergence. And when you align these cutting-edge quantum theories with the world's ancient wisdom traditions, the parallels are just undeniable. Across completely disparate cultures, separated by thousands of years and vast oceans, speaking entirely different languages, humanity has reliably tapped into this exact same intuition.
That's universal.
It is. The Taoists spoke of the Tao, the underlying, unnameable, unified reality from which all the fragmented forms of nature emerge. The sages of ancient India described Brahman, the infinite, undivided ground of all existence, and Maya, which is the illusion of separation.
And you see it in the Christian mystics, speaking of the divine ground of being. You see it in the profound Buddhist emphasis on dependent origination, that nothing exists independently, that the self is an illusion and everything is a massive interconnected web.
Absolutely.
Even modern spiritual frameworks, like the teachings of A Course in Miracles, explicitly posit that the separation of minds is the fundamental illusion of human suffering, and that only perfect oneness is actually real.
All of these traditions, alongside modern physics, point toward one overarching reality is not a collection of fragmented random stuff. It is an interconnected, unified field. And to help you, the listener, truly grasp this, we have to use the most elegant analogy available, which is the wave and the ocean.
Yes, think about a wave swelling up on the surface of the ocean. We look at a wave, and our VR rendering categorizes it as an independent object. We give it a name, it has a specific shape.
Right.
It has a birth when it swells up, a lifespan as it travels across the surface, and a death when it crashes onto the shoreline. But if you stop looking at the surface and look at the substance, you realize a wave is never, for a single millisecond, separate from the ocean.
Not ever.
The water in the wave is the ocean. The wave is simply the ocean expressing itself in a temporary dynamic form.
And the psychological implications of this for you listening right now are massive. In our modern daily lives, we ordinarily experience ourselves as isolated individuals. We feel like separate waves crashing against other separate waves, competing for resources, terrified of the shoreline because we think it means total annihilation.
We're terrified of death.
Exactly. But if physics, psychology, and mysticism are all pointing to this underlying implicate order, then your feeling of isolation is a biological illusion. You are not a separate wave. You are a localized, temporary expression of the entire universe.
You are the ocean.
If you truly internalize that, not just intellectually, but deep in your bones, the crushing weight of separation, the loneliness, the desperate need to defend your ego against the world, it fundamentally softens. You realize you are at home in the universe because you are the universe.
So to bring this massive, sprawling exploration together, what we're really saying is that you cannot answer the question, what is reality, by looking through just one single lens.
No, you can't.
If you only use Newtonian physics, you get a cold, dead machine. If you only use biology, you get trapped in a VR headset. If you only use philosophy, you get lost in words. The search for truth requires a synthesis. It requires acknowledging the bizarre mechanics of the quantum realm, the psychological construction of perception, and the unified intuitions of mysticism.
Exactly. Because reality is simply too vast, too strange, and too multifaceted to be confined to a single human discipline. And there is a crucial piece of humility we must maintain here. Reality existed long before our mathematical theories, long before our religions, and long before the human brain evolved to render it.
Reality does not depend on our understanding to exist.
It simply is. Therefore, the ultimate goal of diving into these depths isn't to find a tidy, final answer that we can write on a chalkboard and just walk away from. The greatest mistake we can make is believing we have finally captured the whole truth. The goal is to cultivate awe. It's to learn how to stand humbly and comfortably in the mystery of the question itself.
And that leads to the ultimate convergence.
Yeah.
The radical conclusion that we've been dancing around this entire time. If the external world is a rendering in your consciousness, and if the quantum observer is inseparable from the observed reality, then the search for reality inevitably, unavoidably, becomes the search for the self.
It has to be.
Because the observer and the observed are not two different things. You cannot look out at the stars without realizing you are the universe looking at itself.
That is the ultimate synthesis. Asking the question, what is the fundamental nature of reality? And asking the question, who am I within it? Are not two different pursuits. They are the exact same inquiry. When you finally strip away the illusions of the biological interface, the temporary nature of the body, and the shifting weather of the mind, what remains is the unified field itself.
What an absolute journey. Okay, let's briefly recap the immense ground we've covered today, just to lock it in. We started by realizing that our biological senses are essentially a VR headset, proving that we experience an internal rendering, not direct reality.
Right.
We then watched the predictable clockwork Newtonian universe collapse under the weight of Einstein's warping space-time and the mind-bending, probabilistic mechanics of the quantum realm, where certainty vanishes and the observer takes center stage.
The double slit experiment ruins everything.
It really does. Then we wrestled with the hard problem of consciousness, discovering that the brilliant founders of modern physics sounded exactly like ancient mystics, describing a unified whole. And finally, we arrived at the realization that our deep-seated feeling of separation is an illusion that we are not isolated individuals, but the vast ocean expressing itself as a temporary wave.
And to leave you with something to really mull over, building directly on the idea that the observer and the observed are inseparable, I want you to try something very specific later today.
Oh, I like homework.
When you walk past a mirror or catch your reflection in a window, I want you to stop. Don't just glance at your hair or your outfit. Look directly into your own eyes. Hold your own gaze. And as you stand there, ask yourself, are you looking at the ultimate observer? Or are you just looking at another temporary changing rendering of the observed world? And if that face in the mirror, with all its history and assumed permanence, is just a temporary wave, who is the ocean looking through your eyes?
Wow. Let that one sink in. Keep questioning your baseline assumptions. Keep seeking the mechanisms behind the appearances. We will catch you on the next one.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who might benefit from the conversation. Your support helps us continue exploring the deepest questions of life, consciousness, and reality. I am Julia Carter, and it is my honor to introduce Joe Bandra, author, philosopher, speaker, healthcare technology pioneer, and lifelong explorer of life's questions. Through his writing, Joe bridges science, philosophy, psychology, spirituality, and direct experience in a search for truth. His first book, Finding Nevaeh, is a transformative journey of self-discovery and the search for lasting happiness. His second book, Body, Mind, and Machine, chronicles his remarkable career and the evolution of healthcare technology. His next book, The Nature of Reality, explores consciousness, existence, and the mysteries at the heart of human experience. Joe's work invites us to look beyond what we think we know and awaken to a deeper understanding of ourselves and the universe we inhabit.
Life often feels like an endless list of tasks, constant noise and distractions, pulling us in every direction. We're all searching for happiness, but what if we've been looking in the wrong places all along?
This was Nevaeh's journey. Lost in the noise, she felt cut off from the peace and happiness she longed for, until she met Joe Bandra, an unconventional, insightful philosopher with a different perspective. Jay, as he is simply known, didn't hand her a map. He gave her something far more valuable, a compass, a way to turn inward, navigate her own thoughts, and uncover the clarity hidden beneath the chaos.
Readers around the world have been touched and inspired by finding Nevaeh.
Your journey to inner peace begins now. Get your copy of Finding Nevaeh, available on Amazon and at findingnevaeh.org, or listen to the audiobook on Audible, Spotify, Apple, and other platforms.